It's a dialogue that also includes everybody over here. So we wanted to break or make a few new rules. Not even rules, just if what I think happens in a conversation is that sometimes you pick up on something or you have a thought and you need to hold on to this till the end of the session. But we're going to make life a little difficult for production and say that if you do have something you want to ask while we're speaking or while you see something on screen, any of the art that Gaurav's going to show, just put your hand up and we'd love to come to you because I think that's what really would feel like a dialogue.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think we kind of condition, that format that first everybody speaks and then you ask, But I think it's more fluid when it's sort of open. So just feel free, whatever, raise your hand or just ask and we can sort of...
Yeah, we can get to you and include you because I think if we're talking about the culture of care, I think it just goes back to that. It's interesting that I just want to talk about Gaurav more than anything. I know him more as Patrani Machi. If you follow him on Instagram, I have stalked him like crazy. I have known him since 2018, where I knew him as Patrani Machi. I had no idea what he looked like. But I knew his art. And I knew that he was drawn to personal stories. I knew that he was holding people with his art. And I think that from that time onwards, really wanted to be a wallflower in his mind and watch the world the way that he watches it. And that's really something I've seen in all his work. He's constantly holding people. And I think that, for me, is what care in culture is about. It's about care being part of humanity. It's how we hold each other. It's how we hold objects, stories, and community within the work that we do. And I want to start by asking you a question.
That's very generous, firstly, to start with. Thank you.
You know that I absolutely adore what you do. And I think that we've collaborated before. We've heard each other's stories. And I want to go back to childhood. And I think I'm going to go back to something. We were chatting backstage, and Gaurav mentioned this entire thing of different artists collect things in different places. And he talked about Arundhati Roy, and he said that she collects words and sentences. We are perpetually, I think, eavesdropping and listening in with our eyes and our ears into people's stories. That's who we are as people.
Absolutely.
But going back to you as a child, and I think your insatiable love for nostalgia and going back to yourself.
Sure.
How does that find its way into your work?
So, I feel we use culture and empathy as terms quite loosely, right? Because I feel it's like, to me, because, I actually was born in a very small village, I would say. It was called Oglewadi, which is after my surname. And I grew up there. And so that's the thing with smaller towns or smaller hamlets or villages, because your world, sort of the world you're exposed to as a child, is basically your immediate surroundings, right? So the things that you see around you, the things that you hear, the things that you smell, kind of slowly... it's almost like osmosis, it's like care, empathy, sort of just enters your life. So for me, because we were in a very small town, my grandfather had a lot of animals. We had dogs and horses and peacocks walking around in our house. So empathy was not taught to us. It just happened by default, because we would engage with not too many humans, So I think which is quite key, because I think empathy comes with intuition and it just happens to you. So that was very much my childhood. And in fact, for me, to sort of, I keep reconnecting with my childhood, because I feel in today's world, we sort of always look for inspiration outside. So we're looking at Pinterest and, YouTube or whatever, Netflix or whatever. But I think the real treasure is inwards. When you look into your personal archives, you look into your family archives, there are so many histories and lived histories, oral histories that are there, right? So there's something I can show you all. So, I found this photograph of my, so the one on the right is my grandmother, and the one next to her is her real sister. And I was just going through some old family archives, and I saw this beautiful photograph of them, and they had a very unique bond, as sisters. And what I remember very vividly is sort of, probably falling asleep on their laps, and those, chiffon saris which had like florals in the 90s and 80s, So oops. Just go behind. How do I? That subtlety with that, just that sari moving, like I love sort of interacting with archives, and I feel that just that subtle thing of just their sari sort of moving with the wind is enough for just to take me back to that time, But talking about that, Tess, I was also curious because whenever I've spoken to you, somehow our conversation goes back to Calcutta. And even though like you're a born Mallu, but you consider yourself, I think, more from, like, I think a Bengali sort of genes.
Yeah, my soul is Bengali. I feel very lucky that genetically I'm from Kerala and I'm Malayali, and I actually am born there. In Kochi. Actually, in a very small, my mother's from a very small little place. So like you mentioned, a little hamlet, a little place called Pudakad. Okay. So it's a tiny place. Now it's probably more well known on the map, but I don't think it was, at that time you would say, oh, we have to go near this place to find, this little village, small town. Right. But I was born there. I moved in my early childhood, but my soul is Bengali. And I think I always say that if I had grown up anywhere else, I would not be the person I am today. Sure. Because Calcutta kind of, it eases you into a culture of, I almost say like adda, where like conversations can free flow without having to have a beginning, middle, and end, without it having to be a debate. I don't need to have a take on everything. I can just join in. I can leave it when I want to. And I think there's a gentleness to Calcutta, yet there is rebellion. So it's almost like you're taught freedom is two things. Yeah. Freedom is this tremendous, for me at least, a tremendous sense of being a woman, which is extremely strong, but also extremely gentle. And I think that's what Calcutta, it was totally okay to see a movie before an exam. It was totally okay, to go and listen to a concert on a school night. And I grew up in a home where music, art was very much part of every day. Sure. So yeah, otherwise there is zero connection. There's no reason why I don't have any nepotism in my family where there is any kind of art as a background or anything. My mother is a literature major. My father is a major in chemistry. Oh, wow. So yeah, but they were both drawn to it.
Right, because I feel, your primary work has been as a casting director. And, when you look at people, because you audition so many people, like day in, day out, right? And so I was curious that where did that sense of empathy come? Like, was it just like you said, by listening to, like, just being open to sort of listening to people, being open to accepting people the way they are? Like, where was the seed of being sort of empathetic towards other cultures and other people?
So I feel two things. When you come to a city from somewhere else and you don't intrinsically speak the language, in a sense belong, you start finding your roots of belonging. And just like you talked about, having dogs outside and osmosis, I think the osmosis in my life is my mother in many ways. And I don't feel like I had teachers that really took a chance on me. But I did have people around me. You get that one teacher maybe who takes a chance on you. I wasn't anybody I would be the person who was looked over in school. So it became super important to me to know those stories. Sure. Yeah. So even when I'm casting, I'm in a classroom with 100 kids. And I don't want a school teacher to tell me, these are the ones who are very good at acting or debate. I want to meet every single one of them, because it is that quiet child, the one who's hiding under a table, who probably is desperate to be heard. And I think that kind of leads into all the work I do.
Absolutely. I would love for you to just briefly tell them about the Meera Nair story you told me, because it's insane, in today's day and age when, like, it's so, I'm sure it's so difficult to even be a casting director, right?
I mean, didn't know what it meant. My first film was Namesake, which was 2005. At that point of time, I don't know the average age of this room, but there was a show called the Bonvita Quiz Contest. And I was co-directing that show, or producing, co-directing it, because you did everything when you were in television at that time. Everything. And my art director was Common. And I met the team and they said, you know what, you should speak to Meera and see how you can be involved. And I spoke to Meera Nair and she called me and she said, so, what films have you been part of? And I said, none. I do television. And she said, do you know what casting is? So I said, I'm assuming I'd seen a lot of movies. So I was like, okay, yeah, the people in the film. And she said, so if you had to choose people, because I'd read the script and I'd read the book before. It was very personal to me because I grew up with a name that nobody could understand in this country. I live in a family where everyone has a beautiful Indian name and I have Tess, which doesn't make any sense. But yeah, people think you're saying yes, guess. It's terrible. And Meera said, no, like who would you put in it? And I said, you know what? I know the cinema of yesteryear. So I had seen a lot of Satyajit Ray. I'd seen a lot of Ritik Ghotok. I'd seen a lot of Aparna Sen. So I was like, can I tell you who I would cast? But they're all dead people. And she said, tell me. And I told her the names of different actors that I would love to see in it. And I was like, in this movie, like, like in Charulata or in Devi, etc. And I put different things. And she said, you know what, you should cast this film. And the process after that was, back at that time, was I would watch TV and I would go for every single thing in theatre. So I knew all the theatre actors, but I hadn't watched any Bengali. So I would take a VHS tape and I would record faces of people that I knew and then go back to office or go back to my studio and ask people who they were. Get a number, meet them.
It's
and that's how, pre-Instagram,
you can just
pre-Google,
stalk people.
you couldn't even you couldn't image. So, but it was that, and I think I had always someone taking a chance on me.
Yeah.
There is no logical reason to why she should have taken me as her casting director. So I love taking a chance on people.
That's beautiful, because I think that's how we build a sort of an ecosystem that sort of shares a lot of empathy and care. I mean, there's a lot of care, right?
Yeah.
Because only when you care, you sort of care to bring something out from somebody else. Yeah. But speaking of process, I wanted to talk a bit about popular culture, because for me, so I used to work for an archive in Bombay called Sarmaya, and it's my role there predominantly was to sort of work with the archives. We had 18th and 19th century objects, and to sort of make them more relatable to today's audiences. So, it's a task, because today, people see things like for 3-4 seconds and, you're done and you just scroll to the next thing. So what I was doing was I was looking at the objects from the archive. Okay, I'll just play this and I can talk about it. So, this is actually, there was an 18th century photo of this is by the way, the Afghan church, which people from Bombay would be familiar about. But my thing was, how do we tell the story? Because the Afghan church was actually built for the soldiers who died in the Anglo-Afghan war. And there were a lot of British and Indian soldiers who died, and it was like a memorial. So I thought, why not put it as a backdrop and have a little good old Kali Pili just go across with the sound? Because that is something that instantly brings somebody's attention to Bombay. It's just the sound of it. And it's funny because, the Fiat, of course, you can find online. But the sound of this taxi is, from where? I found an old video of Devanand driving his Fiat car. And then I just took the sound from there and I put it here,
The sea is always recurrent.
It is, yeah. I feel that lately, because I think the sea probably has been, like as a child, I remember I must have been 2 or 3, and I think it was in Goa probably, but that was the first memory of seeing the sea and just that vastness of it, and just its expanse is like. Even today, when I visit a sort of a coastal town or a city, I'm mesmerized by it. There's just something, and maybe that was something that held me onto Bombay also for like for 10 years. I was living in Bombay, and I think there was just some connection with this sea.
And it's there in a lot of your art. In fact, even
It
if
is,
if you go to, I mean, just your page on Instagram, and you see a lot of the pieces, the sea kind of features.
Yeah.
The sea features a lot in it.
Yeah.
Coming back to this, and I'd love to know what made you. So, I think going back to that picture, and even like, you're in an archive, Gaurav, and there are a million things. There are a lot of things. And I think this is just me greedily wanting to know something. Is that what draws you? What pulled you to take that picture? And then the two other stories I know you'll tell us, which follow up. But I would love to know, like you said, this great memory of you as a child, and that you remember it, and that it's so within you that every time you're near the sea, there's a comfort that comes with it. It's almost like care that comes, along with this image. But what drew you in an archive full of spaces to these three particular things?
I think, see, archives at the end of the day, I mean, for me, archives are people, because they have a personality, they have a character, they have a history. They, like even a photograph or an object or a map or whatever, it comes from a specific time, right? So it has a history that's just with it. So in fact, in this case, it was a beautiful 18th century, an unknown photographer had taken a panoramic view of Bombay. And Satya happens to be one of my favorite films. And there was this thing, which of course I'm sure you all know, but sorry, I'm terrible with technology.
Mumbai ka king kaun? Biku Mhatre! कोई है क्या रे? इधर मुंबई में कोई है क्या? तो आना बिक्कू के सामने. कोई नहीं.
It's interesting because it's actually, Satya was in the 90s, right? But this image is from 1800s. And when Bombay was a completely different place before the, the whole underworld thing and all of that. So I thought it would be an interesting sort of, superimposing, It's a
very khali Bombay.
It is a very khali Bombay, yeah. I'm just going to move ahead. Yeah, and again, like you said, because the sea is here, this was actually for Taxi Fabric, where it was a project that happened in 2015, and we basically refurbished a lot of taxis in Bombay, but we wanted every taxi to be sort of like a moving exhibition. So my taxi was called Cutting, because I'd just moved to Bombay, and I wanted that taxi to be like a little exhibition of my experiences in Bombay. So I remember this kid, his name was Ishtaq Ali, I even remember today. He was selling Buddi Ke Baal on Marine Drive. So I thought he should be on the front seat. And then, of course, there are kabutars, there's the sky. There's also, I wanted to, just throw in some cushions, which, pigeons, because pigeons are like a big part of Bombay, So, and I just thought, let's just go and have fun with this thing,
Coming to this, I think one thing that we really bond over is that we would rather talk to random people than actually sit and have a coffee with someone we possibly know, because there is something very beautiful about hearing stories, and the fact that you remember his name even today, which is almost 10 years later, is this ability for us to connect, right, and illuminate people who meet us for that moment and then kind of disappear. And you tend to see them in different people you meet after that, right? Like I've never seen this kid again on Marine Drive. Like I literally never saw him. I found a taxi driver though. Nasimuddin, his name was Nasimuddin, But I found him once. By then the seat covers had torn, but I never found this person. But then I saw other sort of hawkers on Marine Drive, who would tell me stories of how they moved here to become a movie star. I found this one guy, he said, "Meko Salman Khan banna hai," So, but that's so interesting because I think that, and like, we were saying, right, that I think culture has to be colloquial. Yes.
It's not an elitist concept. It has to be very accessible. It has to be very relatable to everybody, right? That's what makes culture.
Yeah, and it's that connection. So I'll say that even when we're, like, I can tell you when we're casting, you're seeing a million faces. And if you're working with non-actors, You're constantly drawing out a story from each person.
Yeah.
So it's really about that, but it's this thing of like, it'll exist for that moment, and you give it all your attention, and it may not be there again. And then you see this person in passing,
Yeah.
and you see them on the street, and you see them in completely different worlds of their own. And it's just fun to have known them for that.
And you have your own interpretation of that world also, right?
Yeah, I think you said this great line of that we're constantly trying to, only you know the image of yourself in your head. And then I remember saying that, because otherwise we're just filling in gaps. The way I see you will never be the way
Absolutely.
you see yourself. And I think with all people that we meet, we're just filling in gaps that we want to. We're putting in the lines of the story that we actually think are there. It may not even be so.
Yeah. And that also sort of brings me to this thing of, because I think growing up in India in a not a very traditional family, but like quite liberal family, but still sort of holding on to a lot of traditional ideas. I feel like we have never been taught to talk about our vulnerabilities. It's always, you're always told that oh no, it's like, you should always celebrate life. Everything should be joyful, everything should be colorful and happiness. But I think there's this deep sort of sense of being vulnerable. And I think there's a real challenge in putting out vulnerability through art, right? And I think it's very important to do that, right?
Do you find that in the way you process what you're doing, apart from going back home? Because I think it's very easy for us to peel back when it's home and it's ourselves and it's our families who we know intimately for so many years. Even if we don't know them as people, we know them through the stories which are being passed forward. Yeah. But do you feel that even, to the other things that you do, that this notion of illuminating vulnerability, and that it's not the beautiful bits, it's all the bits?
I do, and I'm just going to try look for, there was one, yeah.
Hope? Hope smiles at grief, but doesn't let grief die. She hates despair, but never leaves his side. She troubles the desperate and gently nudges the shy. She has no respect for the lost and no reverence for the sad. She enters unwanted at funerals and marriages alike, the awkward mid-speech feedback on a mic. Hope is the itch in your nose before you sneeze, the wiggle of your toes when you get cold feet, and the pause between each heartbeat.
I wanted to show this piece to you all because I think this was just at the beginning of the pandemic. We were still figuring out how life would pan out for everybody, what's happening. No, we didn't know anything. And I also work a lot in like branding and design. And so when I, I'm used to like very different kind of briefs. But when this brief sort of came from the Tata Group, it was interesting because the brief was for a change not to talk about products, talk about brands, but to talk about empathy, care, and just sort of compassion, And I remember, so Kalki and I had collaborated before, and she was the first person who came to my mind. And she just sort of sent me a voice note of this. And I said, this is it. Let's put this out and see how people react to it. And I thought it was beautiful because it's not, I wouldn't call it funny in any way, but there's a little quirkiness to it.
Which is very Kalki in the way she writes.
Yeah. But there's also that sympathy. And you won't believe that, when we put this out and people sort of just, we didn't expect people to react to it, but it was just to make people comfortable in a sense that there is hope. We don't know what's happening, but there's still hope. And I feel this is one of the pieces where I felt that you have to sort of understand your vulnerable side. It's very important. And it's okay to put it out to the world. It's completely fine.
I want to go back because I think that's to that moment, because I think that's almost a moment of connection between Gaurav and me, is that it started just before the pandemic, but I think the creative collaborations that happened during the pandemic, because we were collectively trying to remember how to laugh in our sadness, right? We were collectively feeling grief and learning to mourn together rather than say move on. And so much of beautiful art came out at that point. And I think that was the time when at least the collaborations that where you did so much spoken word, spilt into that, and you would listen to people, and you always have done this, and I've seen Gaurav do it on numerous occasions where he'll be like, just send me a voice note. It's okay if it's too long. Just send me, and he will find his, I still want to know what makes you draw what you draw. And I asked you this even backstage, he didn't give me an answer. But, when you're listening to a really long story, as someone who's a visual artist and also someone who chronicles almost, I think, different times it's almost like a museum of life that you're creating. What is it that pulls you? This is a really raw piece.
It is, exactly. Yeah. And it's also it's a voice note. It's not even a proper recording. Yeah. And I'm not so keen on, I feel a lot of people, a lot of times people say that we'll do a proper recording, we'll go to a studio. And it's not important to me, because I feel like there is that beauty in imperfection. And I feel, as a country, we are not, I'm not being political, but we are not a perfect country, okay?
Not at all.
And I feel, I'm not saying it through a political lens or anything, but I'm just saying that it's, there is a room to do a lot, and we kind of find a lot of beauty in our imperfections. So it's fine. Sometimes I see so much minimalism around, and I feel it's not us. We can appreciate it, we can resonate with it, but it's not. We are not built that way. Chaos is in our bones, Yeah. So I feel it's very important to embrace it, and I think that's culture to me, Yeah. In the beginning I was saying we use it very loosely, the term, but now I'm kind of trying to rephrase.
No, but I think that if there is one thing, that we are all our broken bits, and it's true.
And we're proud of that,
and we're
right?
very proud of it. I think for me, as a writer and as a curator and someone who's listening to draft after draft, which is what we do in spoken. In spoken, it's so much about preserving someone's voice.
You should tell them about spoken, actually, because maybe some of them.
Yeah, that's my other. I still think that they're very drawn and connected to each other. But spoken is a festival that happens in Bombay, and it will happen 1st and 2nd of Feb in Geo Gardens. And it's really a festival of words, voices, independent music, and storytelling. And when we started, it was just about finding spaces where we could tell our own stories. Unedited, vulnerable, raw, quivering voices, whatever you had to. Just bring it and let's listen to you. It started with 15 people in a room, and it grew into being 7,000. But I think the core of what it is, and for me, Rekha Jha, the journalist, gave me, I think, the best line for spoken. She said, it's my annual empathy boot camp. And I would like us, so Gaurav was asking me, what about audiences? I said, I only know that the audiences have to come in to tune in and not tune out. Yeah. Because to have 7,000 people in Bombay quiet, in an open space, listening to one person tell a story, is in itself, I think, the greatest privilege and luxury one can have. So if you ask me what we did back then in that room with 15 people, if you don't throw away the root of who you are and what you do, I feel that care will come into anything. Like you asked me about teleprompters, and then we're like, no, forget the lines. You will lose lines when you tell your story, and guess what? It's because they weren't important. Like I tell if you forget a dialogue, it's okay. If you remember the scene, you'll be there. So it's the same with life. It's this, let us illuminate all the bits. It doesn't have to be just the beautiful bits.
Absolutely.
Of course, when you do it, everything is beautiful. Let me please say that. It is true. But yeah.
And like you said, I think when you're listening to somebody, you listen to a certain point. And I'm sure even people here, we started at one point and maybe somebody just sort of drifted midway. Yeah. And it's nice to go in that realm, then come back again, or maybe just leave in a sense.
Oh, totally.
Mentally,
Totally. I think one of the things when we were doing spoken, we were very, very clear about is that you should be able to lie down. You should be able to tune into the stars, into the sky, stare at a light. You didn't have to stare at stage. You didn't have to put your ear to the big speakers on stage and listen to every single word. You could tune into yourself while listening to. And I think that's what eventually it'll be, because it's about resonance. And if you care, you will resonate with someone. And that's how we because it's a cycle. I think all these bits, right? The stories we tell, the things we hold. I know you love objects. Even I am very, for me, everything is hope and a wish
Yeah.
on me even at this moment. But I think that we are the stories we tell. And we will connect through that cycle. And that's really what care comes down to. It's the humanity of who we are.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and also creating a community around that, right? Yeah. I see that we have bang on time.
We're very good. Now we're going to ask you to ask us things, or just you can even just share something that you felt,
anything.
heard, or something that maybe resonated with you, or something you saw of Gaurav's that brought up something. You were very happy to listen to you all. Yay.
I have a question, but I want to go last. I don't want to eat up on our guests' time and on the organizer's side. So I don't want to keep that up. But yeah, is there any questions? If not, I can start.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can we? Oh.
I always feel when there are no questions, it's either a very good thing or it's a very bad thing.
So the whole idea for us to do this Log program. Hello, everyone. I'm Samta. I'm from STAR. I'm one of the members who's kind of put this whole thing together. So thank you so much. This was a beautiful session.
Thank you.
And if you notice, the title of this session also was as/off, because just those really tiny, nuanced sort of positions change the way that you think about something. But one of the things which is like a larger project, a curatorial sort of research that we are doing, and that's where this is also emerging, was to understand that we all talk about care. We also talk about, like you spoke very beautifully about vulnerability. But you can be vulnerable when you feel safe. And then there are people who talk about building a safe world, but that in itself is so problematic because you're validating threat, So hence, care in itself is like a beautiful replacement of safety. If we can build a caring world, and if we can learn to care in every way, in everything that we do, it will be a safe world, and people will have the freedom and the comfort to be vulnerable. So what I'm trying to arrive at here is that and there are so many new disciplines, in the last 15, 20 years, there are so many new disciplines that have emerged in the world. People are like kind of, things that we spoke about or did, colloquially, are now becoming disciplines. If there was to be a discipline of care, what should be those ethics that kind of, bring about that discipline? So if tomorrow in colleges we have to teach how to care, which everybody, whether you're doing engineering, you're doing sciences, you're doing acting, you're doing design, if you have to pick an elective or whatever, a necessary subject called care, what should go into that? And this is a conversation with everyone.
There was an elective that I was teaching at the Parsons School of Design, and they told me title this course, So I said, okay, I'll call it contemporary aesthetics, because they like these kind of words. So I was like, okay, it has contemporary, it has aesthetics. But the thing, what I was actually I wouldn't say teaching, but it was like this. It was like dialogues with the students. And what I did in that was I made a curriculum, which was, you're always taught to look at beauty. But we flipped it, and I told them, let's look at the beauty of ugliness. So I told them, tomorrow bring to the class like the ugliest thing you've seen. And you will be surprised, none of them could bring anything. Because they're like, we can't bring this image, like you can't bring a human, or you can't bring an object. And then we had a discussion. And it was really interesting, another thing we did was we asked everybody to get images of spaces, whether it's interiors or whatever. And then we said that let's look at this image and try to describe who this person is, And there was this one image I remember very clearly. Some student had gotten it, and each and every student in the class said that this is a woman's house. She's an artist and everything, a lot of femininity and all of that. You know whose house it was? It was Sabyasachi Mukherjee's house. And that was so beautiful because, you start seeing the world, through the lenses that we are sort of conditioned to. And I feel it's so important to then just step back and feel that, okay, maybe there's more than one personality even in one person, right? So I think...
So I'm so glad you mentioned teaching, because so I teach at SRFTI, and I go to teach producers and directors about casting, because it isn't part of the course. And I think it's super important because there is only one human element in films, and that's your actors who are on screen. And they are the people, they are the heart of what you do. And when we talk about care, one entire session is that everybody has to go through what it feels like to be on this side. So you can't direct someone if you haven't known, I feel, the basic of what it's like to be in this space of wanting to be not self-conscious, but being watched and gaped at, in a sense, with cameras and people just literally taking a note of every single thing you're doing, the fact that you raise your eyebrows too much, or the smallest things. And I give them one note, and I think that in your room, there has to be freedom. And when I say freedom, it's not about freedom to just yell or this, that. There has to be freedom to feel safe. Freedom of the simplest things. Freedom to be able to say, I need a moment before we do this. Freedom to say, I'm not feeling that good right now. Can I walk out, just roam around and come back? Freedom to ask the silliest question according to you. So if we build spaces where freedom is not defined by some huge movement, but in the small things that we do, I think that that's when we really bring care, because freedom is about making sure that you and I have the same things. So that's how I think I always tell them that you have to have a room that has freedom in it, and freedom for everyone to be able to just be themselves. So judgment is, I think, the biggest one. Yeah. Judgment is really hard. So yeah, we do very similar exercise where I put up images from things and I ask them, what do you think what is going on? So, sadness, happiness, this, that, and they'll be completely off. So it's also that, don't immediately distill things down to whatever you think. Just listen. Like we talked about this, that the greatest currency we have right now is attention and care, and you have a lot of it. So just use that. It's the greatest currency we'll ever have, I think, in this world in general. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. So beautiful, yeah.
Yes. Oh, another question has emerged. I'm delighted. I'm always like, please. Like you said, otherwise it's very bad.
All very good.
Oh, very good.
Hi, so I would like to say two things. First one is a response to your question. Of course, I'm not as qualified as you guys to answer it. I'm simply a student, but I beg your pardon? All right. So I've been working on a project for men's mental health. So I'm a fashion design student, and I've been making a garment that helps them feel more comfortable in their skin, and that helps them feel that it's okay to be vulnerable. And in doing research for that project, I came across basically the reason for why men's mental health is so stigmatized, and it is because of the patterns that they've been told to follow in terms of their emotions throughout their entire childhood, as well as adolescence, as well as adulthood, which includes saying things like, men don't cry, and ladki hai kya ro raha hai. And in my opinion, I think if there were to be a course called Caring, it should at the beginning consist of making people unlearn all of these philosophies and then view emotion holistically from all angles. Of course, not all colleges would have enough time to get into different concepts of philosophy, but an overview of all the different concepts, including things like nihilism, which is saying that nothing matters, would help people really put emotion into their own perspective and project it out into the world, as opposed to what has been cultivated throughout their society. And my second question is to you guys. We unfortunately entered a little bit late because we were lost. We couldn't find the theater. But you're a visual chronicler and you're a casting director. So what led to this pairing, and and you guys have collaborated before as well, right? So
yes.
What did you work on together? I'm very curious to know that.
Well, just like you saw Kalki's piece, which Gaurav did, He's done pieces with stories out of commune. And like I said, I think we met at festivals that included art in a far more open sense, and collaboration was key. And I think when you collaborate, you really learn to care for each other. Whatever you're doing, you have to you have to both tremendously care for things. And Gaurav is always like, he listened to stories and he would tell me, hey, what about this one? In fact, he asked me to tell
There's
him.
one on the moon.
The moon story, which is it's like one of my core memory stories, and I would love at some point Gaurav to do it, but I would always think that, oh my God, it's too long. How much work will he have to do? But we collaborated on commune and storytelling, and taking it and making it more than just a person standing there, but to see a story through someone else's eyes. And I think Gaurav really sees things that many of us miss. Possibly. Yeah.
Thank you.
But I just want to say we got a great one there. Learning how to cry freely.
Yeah.
It's a great contribution to this research. Thank you.
No, but you can also say, why, like, how did this happen? Also, I'm a big fan.
No, I think we share like a common curiosity, right?
Yes.
Because yes, stories of course, but food. Like
Calcutta.
Yeah, like we speak like after a long time we speak sometime, but this was honestly a coincidence because I found out. I mean, they told me that Tess was part of it, and then instantly we both from different ends were like, oh, we know each other.
I'll be honest, I didn't even know what the subject was when they said Gaurav. It was in conversation with Gaurav. I just said yes. And I think that there were two things, the culture of care and as care just sounded really interesting. And I think it's integral to everything we both do individually in our lives. And, like I had one question for Gaurav, which there's 1 minute, 17 seconds, but I'm sure there'll be, is that also within what we do. And there is this, obsession with anything that you create, it's about what you eventually create. But and I know we share this, is that the process is always the fun bit to look back on. Why is it we love watching behind the scenes in a movie? Why is it we love sitting together afterwards saying, oh my God, that day? It's so much more than the movie, the story, the piece of art. But what pulls you away? What worries you?
One of my favorite Indian
and
artists.
And what you do,
Yeah, Anju Dodia. Yeah. I really love her work. There's something about her work which I can just like look at for hours, or I'm just obsessed with her work. But there's something very interesting she said. There was a painting she made of a person. I think somebody was, I don't remember it clearly now, but I think somebody was trying to sort of hammer something into somebody's head. And she said something interesting about it, which is that the creative process for any artist is actually a very painful one. It's actually quite painful to think all the time or to create all the time, and it's so stressful, right? The outcome is beautiful, of course, but the process is very painful. But to just end this on a slightly lighter note, I'll show you all something that if you can go back to the AV, I'll show you all the piece first, and then I'll just tell you about it. Not this. This one.
तुमको सितारों में ले चलूं, दिल झूम जाए ऐसी बहारों में ले चलूं। आओ हुजूर तुमको सितारों में ले चलूं, दिल झूम जाए ऐसी बहारों
I'll quickly tell her about this. The reason why I showed this is because, so these are two independent pieces, okay? So the first one was, of course, somebody making jalebi, which I saw in the market, and I came home and I made it. And then few months or maybe a year later, I was in Jaipur in the Johri Bazaar, and somebody was making jalebi. And in my head, I was like, if Van Gogh was walking in this market, would he see his patterns, in the jalebi? And so I came back and then superimposed it on that piece. And I think that is process. Process is about taking time. And like I told you, like in in my studio, like now I finally have a physical studio, and I have a big bed there. And people ask me, why do you have a bed? Because I like to take afternoon naps. So it's like, I like to sleep because I think it's very important, even though you're creating all the time, it's important to just sleep, to dream. Some days I'm just lying and dreaming. And I think this was one of the examples, because it's fine to park something, to revisit it, to rebuild it. Yeah, so that was that.